Hello, everybody, and welcome. This is the Apostate Prophet. I hope you're having a fantastic day. And yeah, today we are here because we want to talk about some very interesting things that I have talked about before on this channel. What an introduction, man. So today we want to discuss or debate a topic that I brought up in the past, which is a topic related to Muhammad's prophecies about the coming of the hour, and we will get into that in a minute. But first off, I want to say thank you to for joining and welcome to two gentlemen, both of whom nobody has ever seen on here, David Wood and the Farouz. Hi, guys.
Thank you for having me. Hello.
Do you want to quickly introduce yourself for those who are not aware? I mean, I basically I called you an Islamic scholar since you call yourself Sheikh Farouz, and also somebody who was coming here to challenge and confront us about our challenge. But what is your background?
Okay.
What do you do?
For I wouldn't take the term scholar, but I appreciate the compliment. So the Fruits is a pseudonym I use. I have a kind of a part-time YouTube channel. Like I post every once in a while. So I guess a little bit about my background. You asked me what I do. So I guess I'll go to both my secular and religious background. My secular background, I have a bachelor's in history, a master's in physics, and then multiple advanced degrees in educational leadership. Islamically, I went through the traditional Ijazah system in the late 90s, early 2000s. And my concentration was on Islamic jurisprudential methodology. So that focuses on like what sources are laws derived from, what are the methodologies that derive these sources. You look at the different legal conclusions and comparative laws, the differences between the 10 modes and 20 transmissions of the Quran and their legal applications, the probabilities of hadith reliability and their applicability, historical trends and disagreements, exegetical methods, and just juristic conclusions and our reasonings. And 30 seconds, the reason I got into that topic was my experience when I converted to Islam. When I converted to Islam, there were a lot of mosques around me, and each mosque had a different interpretation of Islam, and each one felt that theirs was right. So I wanted to know where these differences came from, and I wanted to understand, okay, why do you think this? Where did it come from? What is the history behind it? So this way I could better understand people.
Well, that's a good summary. So, you have been engaged in defending Islam or preaching about Islam for a while on YouTube, right? Also outside of that, do you have any do you have experience in generally trying to prove Islam true or disprove detractors?
I would say a little bit of part of me wants to say neither. So what so like for example, I listened to an argument, like a back and forth one time that you, David, and Sajid Lippum had, and I critiqued it. So when I didn't say, this person's right, this person's wrong 100%. Like, so if I disagreed with you, I stated, this is the point I disagree with you on why. If I disagree with Sajid, I say, this is the point I disagreed on Sajid with and why. If I disagree with David, this is the point I disagree with David on and why. I try to avoid like, so I'm more into like just looking at the facts. And there are certain topics that I, try to like avoid. And then there are certain I embrace. It's like, for example, like when topics I try to avoid, like when I saw a debate between you and other Muslims on Abraham, for example. I don't get involved, like Abraham in the Kaaba. I don't get involved with stuff like that. And here's my reasoning. Abraham is an ahistorical figure. And before people out there, throw me out of religion, whatever religion it may be, by ahistorical figure, I'm not saying that he never existed. What I'm saying is there is no source evidence of his existence outside of religious texts, right? So Abraham exists in the Christian Bible. He exists in the Muslim Quran. He exists in the Muslim Hadith. He exists in Talmud, apocryphal scriptures, but all the references to him are in scripture. So I don't like to get involved in those type of arguments. But if it's something fact-based, word-based, etc., I'll get involved in things more like that.
Okay, that clears it. My other guest here, the Dizzle, do you also want to briefly introduce yourself for those who are not aware who in the world you are?
Nah, people know who I am. No, I'm David Wood. Grew up as an atheist, eventually became a Christian, got interested in Islam mainly because I had a couple Muslim friends who were trying to share Islam with me. So I ended up studying Islam a bit, just because my friends were Muslims, and eventually decided to get into this a bit more for multiple reasons. But among them are the fact that some of my friends are ex-Muslims, and now they're under a death sentence. And I've always felt like I'd be kind of a terrible friend if I just didn't say anything about the ideology that calls for their beheading. You're in this category, AP, because we're friends.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. All right, that's more than enough. Thank you. As for who I am, I'm some guy who makes YouTube videos. All right, so we want to today talk about a topic that I have addressed quite a bit in the past with a certain video that I made in dedication to this topic called Muhammad's Failed Prophecies, and I brought up a problem in Islamic tradition that that Muhammad prophesied that the end would come very soon. I specifically brought up two narrations according to which he said that the end would come within 100 years. And another prophecy according to which he said that the end, or the hour, when he was asked when the hour would come, he said the hour would come before this boy in his presence grows very old. So the implication here, or the idea here, is that Muhammad basically told his believers, his followers, that the hour would come within their lifetime, or quite soon, at least within the next 100 years. So it was rather an apocalyptic religion, intending to prepare for an imminent end of the world, but that end of the world never happened, and therefore I concluded that Islam is false. We will of course get into the details of what this idea is based on, the specific narrations, the specific traditions, the specific quotations, and all their details, but this is pretty much the summary of the topic. And I said before that I have not seen any Muslim scholar or apologist successfully debunk this idea and prove to us that Muhammad was not indeed wrong, that Muhammad was not a false prophet. Farouz said that he can deal with this topic and that he can prove us wrong, and he can show that Muhammad did not make a false prophecy, that this is simply our misunderstanding. And I think he also said in his video that I saw that if he is proven wrong, and if we indeed prove that Muhammad made a false prophecy, he would actually leave Islam or something like that, if I don't remember it wrong. Is this, David, is this pretty much it? Is there anything you want to add?
No. So people. So yeah, we just wanted people to have the idea of what Sheikh Farouz is responding to. So there are hadiths, as you pointed out, where Muhammad Sounds like Muhammad is saying the world is going to end. The final hour is going to come. There's the one within 100 years, and then there's the ones where he's pointing to a young boy and saying, "Hey, if this kid lives, he doesn't die from sickness or something, then the end would come." And so Sheikh Farouz said that he could give a presentation responding to this, and so. Guys, we told him we'd give him uninterrupted presentation time, so don't expect us to like be interrupting him and questioning everything he says. We're gonna let him lay out his case, because sometimes on an issue like this, you need to lay out your case. You need to lay out your understanding of how you're interpreting things, and so we're gonna give him time to do that. No problem there.
Yeah, no, we will definitely listen to the presentation, listen to the argument, and then only afterwards we will begin engaging with it and responding to it, looking at the evidence. And yeah, all right. Are we ready then?
I think we're set.
Yes, I'm ready.
Okay, I can put it here on the screen so you can start the presentation. Yeah.
So the claim that I'm evaluating, the statement was the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, predicted that the day of judgment would occur within 100 years of 632 of the Common Era, 732 CE. So the premise, the world did not end. I worded the conclusion a little differently than our host, that Muhammad inaccurately predicted the date the world would end. So to test the claim, the hypothesis is the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, predicted the world would end within 100 years of his death. So I felt if that claim was true, that there are testable predictions, things we should accept to see, that all the variants of the hadith would support that meaning. They wouldn't be conflicting. There would be no conflicting text from the Quran. There would be no conflicting text from a more authoritative hadith. No other prophecies of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, go past the 100-year mark. And the hadith have no possible meaning within the rules of the language at the time it was spoken. So my approach is I'm going to discuss multiple versions of the hadith next to other hadith and Quranic ayat in the same topic. I'm going to apply jurisprudential methodological principles. And I'm going to discuss a little bit if there's anything that any prophecy that came true after 732 of the Common Era. Then I will analyze how Imam Muslim understand the hadith. So the hadith versions. So there are multiple versions of this hadith. Aisha reported some men among the Bedouins came to the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him. And they said, when is the hour? The Prophet looked to the youngest of them and said, if this boy lives, he will not reach old age before your hour is established. Hisham said, by your hour, the Prophet meant their death. So we see one version where it's saying your hour. Then I'm going to skip the middle one. And then Anas reported that a person asked Allah's messenger, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as to when the last hour would come. He had in his presence a young boy of the Ansar who called Muhammad Allah's messenger, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, said, if this young boy lives, he may not grow very old till the last hour. We see the last hour coming to you. So we see two different versions of the hadith worded two different ways. Now the 100-year hadith, Abdullah ibn Umar, who said, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam led us in praying Isha towards the end of his life. When he had said the salam, he stood up and said, do you see this night of yours? 100 years from now, there will not be anyone left of those who are on the face of the earth. Now Nawawi, who is considered the greatest commentary on Sahih Muslim, stated what is meant is that everyone on the face of the earth on that night would not live for more than 100 years after that night, whether he was young on that occasion or not. It does not mean that anyone who was born after that night would not live for 100 years, and Allah knows best. Now there's another hadith where Abu Hurairah mentioned that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, Allah will raise for this community at the end of every 100 years, the one who will renovate the religion for it. And then we have another hadith, it's called the Hadith of Gabriel, which is one of the most famous hadith, and it's supposed to have happened at the very end of Muhammad's career as a prophet. So he was asked about when the hour is, and his response was, one who is asked knows no more than the one who is requiring it. And then he was asked of some of its signs, and he gives some of the signs, like you'll see barefoot, destitute, goat herders vying with another in the construction of magnificent building, and some more. Now, even if, let's just say there were not two conflicting versions, one that says your hour and one that says the hour. Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani is the nickname, the commander of the faithful in hadith. He's considered the greatest hadith commentator to ever lived. And he actually wrote on the Prophet Muhammad, when I'm referring to the hour, in various hadith throughout, not just that hadith, but various hadith throughout all the collections. And he found 3 different ways that the Prophet Muhammad used the term the hour. So one was the hour, meaning the day of judgment, which is the greater hour. The other time, I'll go to the bottom and then go back to the middle. When the Prophet said the hour, he's using it in reference to the lesser hour, which means when any of us die. And then there was a third meaning that appears in various hadith collections, which Ibn Hajar has labeled the middle hour. It's the death of a community. So if we said, that everyone in New York, will be dead by this time, like everyone alive in New York now will be dead by this time, right? That's the middle hour because it's a group of people. Now, what does the Quran say? So in chapter 7, verse 187, it says, they ask you, O Muhammad, about the hour. When is its arrival? And he said, its knowledge is only with my Lord, and none will reveal its time except him. So, I've put a couple different hadith, a couple different verses of the Quran here. And, that are stating that no one knows when the hour day of judgment will be. Now, I wanted to get into jurisprudence. Now, how jurists deal with conflict of evidence is if one says two different texts on a similar topic, the jurist will actually gather the different verses, the different hadith, the different narrations and explanations of the first 3 generations and weigh them next to each other. And each usul, which is methodology, and madhab, which is school of law, there are 4 schools of law left in Sunni Islam. There were way more in the past, but they died out. So there are 4 still remaining, and each of those 4 has a different methodology for resolving, but there are certain things that they'll have in common as well. And no text should be understood in isolation. When I say that, I'm not just talking about the Quran. That applies to the Bible as well. That applies to the United States Constitution. That applies if you're reading a historical text. It applies if you're reading other Islamic texts. So when weighing against each other, there's about 6 different, there could be more, but I'm just speaking of 6, right? Contextualization is one of them. Looking to see if there's other historical circumstances. Harmonization. So it's a way that both meanings could be accurate. So I'll give a secular example. If you said I was at my friend's house eating dinner today, and if you said that I was at a car dealership today, right? Some people could say, oh, that's a contradiction. You couldn't be at the car dealership and you couldn't be. Whereas harmonization, wait, maybe I went to the car dealership first in the morning and I went to the friend's house in the afternoon. Abrogation, is the idea that a later verse canceled out an earlier verse. Now, choice, this is basically very, choice has happened when, it's not totally relevant to this topic, but to that hadith, but it is relevant to Islam. So if there's one hadith that says A breaks your ablution, and another hadith that says A does not break ablution, the jurist Ahmad ibn Hanbal, he gave the choice, right? No evidence, they're equal evidences, so follow your choice. Now, preference, other of the imams, Now, Imam Shafi'i looked at certain things like that, and he preferred one. Abu Hanifa preferred another. And then there is another is rejection that some said they've just rejected them both. But rejection is not necessarily the best term because it's really just a different form of abrogation. But it's if a text has more transmitters than the other, it's considered stronger. If a text goes against the majority or the consensus, there's, I give a whole list. I'm not going to go into them all, but, it's people who are watching can just read or rewind if they really want to know. So resolving the conflict using the classical methods, conciliation method. So if Quran 7:187 and 30:134 state that the Prophet Muhammad does not know when the hour will occur, and the Hadith of Gabriel states that the Prophet Muhammad does not know when the hour will occur. The Hadith of Abu Dawood states that 100 years a renewal will come. And, the other Hadith have to harmonize with these Hadith. So the 100-year Hadith must refer to those who were alive at the time. And then the Hadith that says the hour, the one that says the hour and your hour better matches the meaning of the one that says your hour. Now, if I were to use the preference and rejection abrogation method, the Quran text is mass transmitted. The Hadith of Gabriel is in the category of famous, well-known. The other Hadith is considered sahih, but it's not considered famous and well-known, the other. So mass transmitted and well-known are higher standards of evidence than a singular transmission in all the Islamic schools except for one movement. One movement says that they're equal to the Quran, but the rest of the Muslims throughout the history of Islam outside of that movement, don't agree. So therefore, the meanings from the mass transmitted and well-known text takes preference. I just wanted to go a little isnad criticism and matan criticism. Isnad is the chain and the matan is the text. So when we say hadith is authentic or sahih, and I don't totally like the word authentic, but it's the most common one used. Usually we're only referring to the chain. So like if Imam Muslim said it's sahih, it means that the chain, every linking, means that he graded.
Excuse me, we're
over
very
time?
much we're very much over 10 minutes.
Okay.
Do you want to conclude it quickly?
Sure. I'm just gonna leave this open, that these are the principles of matan criticism. And I felt that if the hypotheses were accurate, we would see that did not mean the burden of proof. But I gave a thought experiment if it did, and another layer, but I'm going to skip that. So the conclusion is basically all the variants of the hadith do not support the meaning. There are conflicting texts from the Quran. There are conflicting texts from more authoritative hadith. There are other prophecies of Muhammad that go past the 100-year mark. And, there are other possible meanings within the rules of the language at the time that it was spoken. And I guess that's it. You can undo it now if you'd like.
All right. Well, thank you.
Although we might want to bring that back up. No, not necessarily the second, but I might have a point or two to make based on one of the earlier slides.
Okay, we can always get back to it whenever you need it.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah. Okay. But I made quite a few notes here, and I have also prepared a few things in advance before we went before we started the stream. I'm sure David also has a lot of things to say.
I only have a couple thoughts on it.
Okay. Here is the issue. I just have some problems. One major problem with the presentation and with your objections. Now, so you have brought up several points, including one that you emphasized quite a bit, which is that even if we were to assume that that Muhammad only said the world would end within 100 years, and there was nothing conflicting, no other conflicting narration, or if Muhammad said the hour will come before this boy grows very old, and there was no other conflicting narration, we would still have to look at I don't know, Quran verses, for example, which say that he may not know the hour, or nobody knows the hour. Or we could still look at certain narrations where he says every 100 years Allah sends a renewer, and so on. Here is the problem. In my opinion, in your worldview, and in the world of somebody who believes in Islam and who believes in the Quran, who believes in the truthfulness of Muhammad, it is simply impossible for Muhammad to contradict himself. It is impossible for Allah to contradict himself. And it is not possible, when making such truth statements, for Allah and Muhammad to contradict each other. Therefore, if you find Muhammad making a statement which contradicts with another statement that he made, or which contradicts with Allah or the Quran, then you take that as a clear contradiction and prove that the narration is invalid. But that is only true because you believe that Islam is true. It's only true because you believe that Muhammad was a truthful prophet. For somebody who is not a Muslim, for somebody who does not believe in the infallibility of Islam and Allah and Muhammad's prophethood, that is not really a solid argument. I will never doubt the possibility, and in fact, the idea that Muhammad contradicted himself quite a few times, and that he was also at times in contradiction with the Quran. I might accept that he did say, I do not know at all when the hour will come, which I don't think he said, and I think that's a worthy thing to go into, while also claiming at another point that the hour will come within 100 years. That I think is entirely possible. For you, it is not possible because you think he cannot contradict himself, but for me, it's possible because he's just a mere human being, and he can, throughout his prophethood, for different reasons, out of for an ulterior motive or unintentionally, change his mind and contradict himself. David, it looks like you wanted to say something. Huh?
Oh yeah, I just wanted to, because I was thinking something similar, in the sense that you have sort of there's an insider's perspective and an outsider's perspective. I mean, this is true of everything, right? So in Christianity, if someone's criticizing Christianity, I'm thinking of it from the perspective of a Christian, where I'm trying to make sense of it. Whereas the other person who doesn't believe in Christianity doesn't have to think about it in a way where he's trying to make sense of it. He can just think it's a mess. And so when we're talking about something like Muhammad's prophecies, or various things Muhammad said, I think AP and I are on the same page that we're not going to this expecting consistency, thinking, oh, if he said this here and that conflicts with that over here, then we either need to reconcile them or reject one of them. We could be thinking, well, he may have said completely different things at different times, because we don't actually believe that he's getting this stuff from God. Whereas as a Muslim, you're not thinking that. You're not thinking of it. You're not thinking of it from a critical perspective, in the sense that you're raising this as an objection. For obvious reasons, you're thinking of this from a Muslim perspective, where you think you believe that Muhammad's a prophet, and so you're trying to reconcile those things. And so, but for everyone who's watching, that distinction is important to keep in mind. Whatever the perspective that's on the table is, you have this insider's perspective and this outsider's perspective. And why it's relevant here is, we may listen to Sheikh Farouz's responses and think, well, that doesn't convince us that this is the correct solution to this. We may still think it's a problem, but from a Muslim perspective, Muslims are probably saying, hey, if there's even a plausible response to this, I'm going to accept the plausible response to this, rather than just rejecting Islam or something like that. So anyway, yeah, we were thinking along the same lines there, I think. But
pretty much. What do you say, Farouz?
So I'll just go one at a time. Actually, what both of you said, I think, is consistent and accurate. Though one of the things that David said about the outsider perspective, it actually made me think of a presentation I did, as well as that's like I made a slide of that for tomorrow's discussion. But I did a lecture and it was for a majority Muslim audience, but some Christians were there, some atheists as well, and then some people don't know. But I actually, like, one of my general problems with is I feel that sometimes, and I'll go from the Muslim first and then to the non-Muslims. Like, I feel that many times Muslims pick up the Bible and they have a Muslim bias, right? And I feel sometimes Christians not all Christians, not all Muslims, so anyone listening, pick up the Quran and they have the bias of their previous views. And that's now, so one of the lectures I did was I actually taught Muslims the exegetical traditions within Christianity. I taught the and then how this leads to different interpretations within different Christian groups. So I taught the historical critical method, I taught the devotional method, but then I broke down the devotional method from the Trinitarians, from the Unitarians, from the different groups, and then was like, when someone is coming from the lens of a historical critical, this is how they view these verses. When someone is coming from the lens of a Trinitarian, this is how they view these verses. When someone's coming from the lens of a Unitarian, this is how, because I think it's more important than of people fighting and yelling at each other and slamming over the head, at least for a better world in the future, is that people try to understand each other and they try to understand each other's points of view before discussing them is not always possible, but I think you get the bigger picture.
But it's so do you agree with our point that that it is hard for us to accept an objection like this narration contradicts with this narration or contradicts with this Quran verse, therefore we cannot accept it? Do you agree that that is not a good objection in our opinion,
okay,
from our point of view?
I'm going to say partially yes and partially no. Like, I can empathize and I can understand where you're coming from. So let's just say we were having a conversation about like 10 different issues, not just one, right? So if we were talking about 10 different issues, you might say, you know what, like, I can grant you that this hadith seems to mean this the way you're saying it, but what about this? And like, so I if that was like the discussion, like, I get that. I don't totally, and I get that you feel that you don't have to reconcile. Like, I understand that as well.
But here is an issue. Even if we accepted that contradiction, rules out the possibility that this narration, which disproves his prophethood, even if we accepted that the contradiction makes this whole argument of ours invalid, I still want to, and we will get into that even further. I don't think we're through that. I still think there's one more thing to add here. You talked about how to deal with contradictions, and you brought up harmonization of, combining different pieces of information and then pointing out that they do not actually contradict each other. And I think we could very much use this example in the following way. You brought up that Muhammad said on multiple occasions that he does not know when the hour will come. And you also brought up that the Quran says the knowledge of the hour is only with Allah. I will say, okay, that's fine. Let's say all of these are authentic, real phrases, real narrations, real verses. I don't think that it is absolutely contradictory for Muhammad say, I do not know when the hour will come. That knowledge is only with Allah. But within 100 years, the hour will appear. Or before this boy grows very old, the hour will appear. Would you agree with that?
So
said, for example, if I said, I don't know exactly when it will happen, but I say it will happen within 100 years.
So just to clarify, you're saying Muhammad could say, just like a Christian could say, hey, I don't know when the end is going to come, but I think it's going to come within 100 years
Yeah.
or something like that.
That's
right?
that's not a contradiction.
Like you're not saying it's exact. Like here's the exact, March 17th, 2027. That's when it happens. Just say, it's going to happen. It's going to happen soon.
Yeah,
But,
it's not even an it's not even an I think. It's not even just an idea. It's you could say for sure, I don't know when it will happen. Only Allah knows. But I know for sure that it will happen within the next 100 years. In fact, we have a hadith in which Muhammad says precisely something along those lines. He says, "You ask me about the hour, and the knowledge of it is only with Allah. But within the next 100 years." Nobody will be left alive on the earth. So do you accept that this is not necessarily an absolute contradiction?
Okay, so I think there's two parts. So the first part of your argument, that it could be harmonized, the way you said, yes. The second part, the way you worded that hadith, I don't know that hadith. I'm not sure if it's if it's a combination of two, but
I can bring it up in a minute. I'll just keep going.
No, that's it. That's it.
I'll just add something while AP is looking something up. Wanted to add one point which will favor the Farus a bit, and that's that. Well, let me back up a little bit. So if we're talking about Muhammad's prophecies and we open up these sources, and there are prophecies that talk about, they make it sound like the end is going to come, that the judgment is going to come soon. And there are other prophecies that sound like the judgment is going to come far off in the future. Basically got several different possibilities. One possibility is that Muhammad didn't say any of it, right? All of this is made up. So there are people like, Jay Smith and Robert Spencer who believe that like Muhammad didn't even exist. So they would believe that all of this stuff is made up. Then you could have the sort of the other extreme would be that Muhammad said all of it and a bunch of it is contradictory. If he's saying it's going to happen within 100 years and other prophecies say it's going to happen after 100 years and multiple things are going to happen, then you'd have just multiple contradictory sources. And then the sort of middle ground would be two options. One, either Muhammad said the things about, he actually said the things about the end coming near, and other people made up or misinterpreted or misunderstood things to make it sound like the end is going to come later. Or Muhammad actually said the things about the final hour coming way off in the future, and then people misinterpreted or misunderstood things, some of what he said, as if he was saying that the judgment is going to come soon. So you got these four possibilities. He didn't say any of it, or he said all of it, even if it sounds like contradictions, or he said some of it and other stuff was made up. But the only point I wanted to add to all of that is because I distinguish between insider and outsider. Even from an outsider's perspective, I would say that if there's a way to harmonize it, that we kind of should accept that, right? In other words, if I got these two things and they sound contradictory, but you point out, you're the insider, and you point out, actually, here's a way to harmonize these things to where they could both be true. Or if you had a reason to dismiss one in the favor of another, I don't think we should be absolutely glued to the idea that no, this has to be a contradiction. So I think harmonization, if harmonization works, then harmonization should be accepted.
I want to add two sources to what we have just discussed. One to support what I brought up earlier, and one to support what David just mentioned. So this is one source which is from Sahih Muslim, according to which, read in English, it says, "I heard Allah's messenger is saying this 1 month before his death. You asked me about the last hour, whereas its knowledge is with Allah." Part 1. "I, however, take an oath and say that none upon the earth of created beings would survive at the end of 100 years. This is one of those narrations which deal with the 100-year prophecy, which I clearly take as an indication that the world will end within 100 years. But within the same narration, you can also find this part where it says the knowledge is only with Allah. If we accept that this is indeed about the hour, and he does indeed mean that the hour will come within 100 years, I do not think, just from a logical point of view, that there is any contradiction in here. He could say, you asked me about the last hour, only Allah knows that. So the specific hour, only Allah knows that. But I know it will happen within 100 years. And another thing I want to, the other source that I want to quickly bring up is also something that David mentioned. There is another narration of this same event in Tirmidhi, in which it says, Ibn Umar said, people misunderstood the saying of the Messenger of Allah in what they say based on these hadiths about 100 years. And the Messenger of Allah only said, there shall not remain anyone who is upon the surface today, meaning only this generation would end. So even according to Ibn Umar, according to this narrative, people misunderstood it and thought that the end would come within 100 years. It's not just us who are making this assumption.
Okay.
Anything you want to say?
No, there's nothing I disagree with you on that. And there was something that David said that I agreed with, but I can't remember what. I was like, wanted to write it down, and then it just slipped my head. But I think what. I remember what I wanted to say is that, like, even what David said, like, and this is something I think a lot of listeners don't understand, is that we can agree on an issue, right? Like, so you can agree with me on an issue and not believe in Islam, right? I can agree with David on an issue and not be a Christian. I can agree with AP on an issue and not be an atheist. And so when I hear a lot of times, so I actually appreciated David's comment. And a lot of times I hear from listeners, from both sides, the Christian and Muslim side, different things. I mean, when I said I was coming on the show, I had one Muslim tell me it's not permissible to have a conversation with you, and then I had a Christian say, "Bring it on, we're going to tear you a new one," and something. And I'm like, we're coming to have a conversation. We can agree to agree. We can agree to disagree. We can walk away and say, have a good night.
Yeah. And along those same, by the way, you're going to get, just so you know, you're going to get more of that. You're going to get more of that. Like as soon as we're done, you're going to be hearing, don't think I'm claiming to be a prophet here, but you're going to hear from a lot of other people that you should not be having any sort of discussions with us. Just so everyone knows, I actually prefer this to the endless hostility. But
exact same.
But notice what a group is saying. Anytime one group is saying no, there cannot be any sort of interaction with outsiders unless it's one of hostility. That's I mean, my goodness, that's a cult mindset, right? Like you can't trust anyone outside your group, and you can't. I mean, it doesn't have to be that with us, because they can say, because these guys, they criticize Muhammad all the time and the Quran and so on. You shouldn't have any sort of discussion with them. But I mean, think about like where does that leave us, right? It leaves everyone in like separate groups with no like calm, rational discussions. Everything is just like insults and abuse all the time. And I don't know, it doesn't, I mean, we'll go that route when that's the only possibility of interacting with someone, like people who are saying they're going to kill AP and so on as soon as they get in power. But it doesn't mean
that's it's funny. It was just the
So you're laughing at the idea of him getting his head chopped off. That's I know.
I laugh when I hear it. It's fine.
Yeah, no, because like I've had, not by a religious group, but I was told by a political group basically that about how I don't deserve to live, and they need to get rid of me and this and that, because I said someone had more evidence than another person on a topic.
Yeah, and that's
Unacceptable.
in a sane world, if someone disagreed with you, they'd say, "Here, let me show you where you're wrong," or something like that. But no,
No,
we got to chop your head off.
yeah, it's great that we have that we can come together and have this conversation. I do a lot of my work in criticizing Islam and opposing Islam in a very provocative way, and often the provocation is deliberate because I think it serves very much as a supporting factor to attract more attention to the point, and then I want to see the reactions and engage with them. The downside of it is, of course, that a lot of people think I'm just looking for a fight, and they hate me. They cannot take the mockery and the humor, and we end up fighting, and I get into endless back and forths, endless fights, which turn pretty dirty and bad, and I don't like that. I don't prefer that. I like the humor, and I like to do things in a provoking way, but I don't want to fight with people. I want to come together and sit down and have a conversation after the laughter, after the offense. Even if people believe terrible things about me, I want to point that out, but then come together, have a nice time, and talk about our disagreements, no matter how wild they are. I really prefer this, and I really appreciate that you have come here to talk to us about this. And I invite every single Muslim and Muslim apologists, even those that fought with me in the past in the most brutal ways, to come here and just to sit together and talk. We don't have to fight. It doesn't make my life better. It doesn't make your life better. It makes nobody's life better. So I'm really happy that we can agree on that. And go.
Oh, I was just going to point out, because I know the Farouz doesn't have all night. He's going to have to go at some point. We've all got kids and so on. But if we could pull up I had one main thought to his to the presentation. If we could go back to the slides, I wanted to go back.
I have a lot of them too, but we don't have enough time. But let's do this.
Oh yeah, that's why. I have individuals, and some of this I agree with. But if you could go back, it was towards the beginning.
I can actually go through the slides here, which is interesting. I didn't know I could control your slides.
I didn't know that at all. Yeah. That's interesting. Go all the way back towards the beginning. Being lazy. Hang on. Okay, so was that the beginning?
This here's the beginning.
Okay, so go forward. Where's the one where it gives the different possibilities? Okay, yeah, here we go. As far as predictions, this is really my main concern in all of this. So if this claim is true, by the way, this is relevant to interpreting not only hadiths, but all kinds of things where stories might change over time, because that happens a lot. As people are telling stories over time, stories sometimes change and so on. So this claim about if Muhammad actually predicted that the world would end within 100 years or within the lifetime of a boy, then we would expect all the variants to support that meaning. Whereas I would expect the exact opposite. So in other words, I'm thinking, if that's true, if Muhammad did actually say this, I would not expect all variants of the hadith to support that meaning. And the reason is the hadith collections are being written down after the most straightforward meaning of the hadith had already been falsified, right? In other words, so imagine Muhammad comes along and he says, the end will happen within 100 years. Within 100 years, everyone will die. And this kid will see the end. This kid will be alive. If he doesn't die from something else, this kid will be alive to see the end coming. If Muhammad said that, then by the time you get to 100 years later, people are going to know, okay, this didn't happen. This didn't happen. And so at that point, there would be a strong inclination to reinterpret and revise those hadiths. So if you get to the time that Sahih al-Bukhari and Sahih Muslim are being written, we would expect different versions that would correct what looks like an error. Even if they're still Muslims, they don't think even if they think they were completely misunderstanding it, we would expect different versions of the story to arise that don't have what looks like a prophecy that had been falsified. So I would actually expect, if Muhammad did say what those hadiths claim about him saying that the end would come soon, I would expect there to be different versions of the hadith that don't include the error later on.
I want to add to that. I mean, we brought up this source earlier where Ibn Umar himself says that people understood this, but it was actually referring to the end of the people and their generation. So there we have a source, an Islamic source, early Islamic source, actually agreeing that this is what people thought. People thought the end would come within 100 years, but apparently they misunderstood it. And as a result of that misunderstanding, it is entirely reasonable for us to accept that people may have, due to their new perspective, the new information that the world didn't indeed end, they may have changed the original claims, the original prophecies.
So we said a lot. So anything you want to,
There's nothing overall that you said, like, because we're speaking, like hypotheticals, theoreticals. The one thing though, I did have a question though about if that's the case, why not then, instead of changing to fit, why not just try to get rid of it altogether? Right. So why would Imam Muslim bother putting this in his collection if he thought that meant the world was going to end 100 years? If you wanted to maintain your belief, you could kind of just leave it out altogether. So that's my question.
I think the answer to that would be simple. There are several answers. One of them would be Muslims often praise these imams for their diligence and their adherence to a certain standard of verification and authentication of these narrations. They travel around for years and collect narrations which were transmitted through different narrators to them. So if these imams hear these specific narrations from these people who clearly say, hey, we have heard the Prophet Muhammad say this, then it is not as simple as it may seem for them to just say, yeah, okay, this doesn't make sense, we will not include this at all. Because it's not just one imam, it's multiple imams. It's not just one narration, it's multiple narrations. What they are left with is to say, okay, this hadith looks it just looks interesting, but the content, as it appears, doesn't make sense. But we have to record it because that's our standard. So let's record it, but make of it what we, what we can do, and somehow interpret the meaning of the text in such a way that it makes sense from our perspective. Because obviously Muhammad was a true prophet; he can't be wrong. And this source, this phrase from him, is obviously authentic. Since he cannot be wrong, and since this is authentic, he must mean something that actually makes sense. So let us interpret it in such a way. I think that would be the way to go for them.
Yeah, let me add something real quick, because Sheikh Farouz is correct. So the question is, if it really looks like a mistake and an error, then by the time you get to Imam Muslim and Bukhari, why don't they just throw that out, right? Just not record it. And then AP pointed out that, well, maybe they're just being intellectually honest here. We've got a method. These could be hadiths that were stories that were widely known and wanted to record them. I just wanted to add that there is actually a benefit to passages like this. I mentioned earlier that there are people who don't believe that Muhammad existed. There are critics who don't believe Muhammad existed, so they believe all of this stuff is made up. When I think why I disagree with them, it's actually passages like this. So not even thinking, hey, I'm using this to show that Muhammad is a false prophet. I'm always thinking of, why would someone invent this? If you're saying this was invented, why would someone invent this? Like if you were saying Muhammad performed a miracle, okay, I can at least think of reasons to invent stories about Muhammad performing miracles. If you're saying that people invented all of Muhammad's prophecies because he never existed or he didn't say any of this stuff, I'm looking back at this going, well, why would they invent that? Why would they invent this story that sounds like something that's completely false? And moreover, why would they invent it after it's already been falsified? So if people during the time or shortly before the time of Bukhari and Muslim are inventing stories about Muhammad because they're coming up with a new religion or something like that, why would you invent this kind of thing? And I don't see a good reason. I don't see. So anyway, the long story short, when you're looking at this stuff from a historical perspective, it can actually help answer certain objections that people have. But with that said, as far as applying it as AP did to Imam Muslim, I think you could actually look at this and say, since Imam Muslim recorded this, and when even though he knew, and he records multiple versions of it, since he recorded this, even though he knew that the most straightforward interpretation of some of these passages was that Muhammad made a false prophecy, since he recorded that, this really means that he was trying to record information accurately. And so for me, it would make me think, okay, this actually adds credibility to his work. So since I can trust him over here, maybe I can actually trust him in some of these other areas where, I wouldn't have trusted him before. But if he's really trying that hard to include accurate information, that means he's actually being a good historian here.
Yeah, then that's what I think. That's the idea that I prefer. And there you can also see the difference. Like David, for example, brought up some malintent here. I said that they have good faith, and this just shows who is the enemy of Islam and who has the better attitude toward Islam. So I would say I lean more toward the idea that these early scholars who recorded these ideas were actually they were acting in good faith. They didn't mean to distort and deliberately, with malintent, create something that is false. I would say they believed in it, but due to their biases, created something that is eventually inaccurate and, in my opinion, disproves Islam. But we've said a lot. I want to ask you, Farouz. So, given all that we have discussed, what is your perspective on this whole idea? Do you still think that there is a possibility that we are right and that Muhammad made a false prophecy, or do you think that that idea can be thrown out the window?
So actually, can I come back to that, because I wanted to address David's point?
Yep.
So so I actually think you made a very good argument for the criterion of embarrassment. And I'm usually in history, because I'm usually opposed to the criterion of embarrassment. And I've been that way for a while. And part of my reasoning is because I think quite often when people use the criterion of embarrassment, they're projecting their modern day belief
that can happen
on previous people. Also, I think sometimes they leave off motive. So Sheikh Muhammad Nasruddin Albani, he did an article. It was called Fabricated Narrations About the Black Man. And it was people there were people who were racist, and they invented hadith, against Black people in order to justify the mistreatment of Black people. So, and Sheikh Muhammad Nasruddin had pointed out, and the Muslim scholars of the past preserved that, not because Muhammad said it, so that you would know what he didn't say, but just so you would know what people are saying that he didn't say. And so, when you look back, if you do the criterion of why would they preserve that, right? Because that makes Muhammad look bad. Well, no, there were people who actually wanted to they had motive. They wanted to justify behavior. So they had a motive to invent stuff. And you asked me about, possibilities and probabilities. I am one who does not ascribe to 100% mathematical certainty on anyone. I think, yaqeen in the Quran, like religious certainty, is different than mathematical certainty. So I do think that the explanations, given by Imam Nawawi and Ibn Hajar, as well as Ibn Omar and Aish, they suffice to, for this one particular issue.
But how? I'm just trying to understand, because I think so their explanations are basically the foundation or an extension of what you have pretty much presented today, that there is no contradiction, that there is no falsehood in them due to different factors, including that the prophet would be contradicting himself, that there are contradicting reports, or you brought up some other reasons, for example, that these narrations contradict with historical facts, which I think would be a bad objection, but I don't think that any of these explanations are actually acceptable, because I think they simply come from a place of bias. And in my opinion, when I sit down and look at the sources as we see them, I also want to bring up quickly this, by the way, I looked into the different narrations of that specific hadith which deal with when Muhammad says the hour will be established before this boy grows very old, and looked into the study of narrators. And there are 3 variations of this hadith in which, in 2 of these variations, he speaks of the hour. For one of those, we have 3 specific narrations. For the other, we have 1 narration. He clearly says the hour will not be established until this boy grows very old. According to the other variation, for which we have only 2 narrations, which allegedly originate from Aisha, he says, your hour will come upon you before this and this happens. Here we have, if we just look at the credibility of narrators and the number of narrations, it is much more likely that Muhammad actually said the hour will not be established before this boy in your presence grows very old. Whereas a lesser number of narrations says your hour will come upon you. And I would think, very obviously, this distortion here happened because these reports were recorded way after these generations of people, way after that boy died. So they tried to make sense of it and created a version where Muhammad actually speaks of their hour instead of the hour. I think, looking at the evidence in this case, looking at the evidence in the case of the 100 years after which everybody would disappear and the world would end, I think my clear conclusion here is that Muhammad made false prophecies. And I think we don't have much time, but there are lots of different pieces of evidence which support this too. For example, Muhammad's prophecies that Jesus would come very soon, that Gog and Magog would soon invade the Arabs, that he thought somebody in his presence is the Dajjal, that during an eclipse he thought this is the coming of the hour, and so on. There are lots of pieces of evidence which actually support the idea that he did expect the hour to come any time now, and he did make false prophecies based on that idea. Whether he did actually believe in such an hour, whether he did actually believe in a prophethood, or whether he was lying to people, I'm not going to make a judgment on that as we speak. But I simply don't see a way out of here. I don't see a way of explaining these things away and conclude that these are not false prophecies.
Let me just add a quick clarification, because sometimes we forget that there are people jumping into the discussion who might not be too familiar with what we're talking about. When we're all of us here who are having the discussion, we all know what we're talking about. But just a general breakdown for anyone who wasn't here at the beginning, or if anyone is totally new to this. In the hadith, so these narrations about things Muhammad said and did, there are some that say that Muhammad is asked about the hour, the final judgment, and he points to a young guy and says, if he doesn't, if he lives long enough, or, if he doesn't die of something else, then he'll be around to see the judgment. And there are other passages that where Muhammad says that nothing's going to be left alive. No people aren't going to be left alive within 100 years from now. So if you take those as authentic, it sounds like something that was falsified, that shows Muhammad was a false prophet. But there are other hadiths. Where it sounds more like Muhammad's not saying that this kid is going to be around at the final hour. It's, this kid will be around at your final hour, meaning your death, or the death of this community, or something along those lines. And that the prophecy about 100 years was the meaning of that. The actual meaning, according to this theory, is that Muhammad is simply saying, hey guys, has it occurred to you that we're all going to be dead in 100 years? What, like none of us is going to be alive 100 years. And then so the idea about how those other versions arose that look like they were falsified is that people misunderstood these things that Muhammad was saying. So Sheikh Firuz is claiming that from an Islamic perspective, you would obviously go with the ones that make sense. And so how did those others arise? Well, some other method. And AP's pointing out, it looks like Muhammad said gave the false prophecies, and that his followers later modified and tweaked them so that he's not exposed as a false prophet. So that's the general gist of what's going on. And so I just wanted to clarify that. But yeah, what are your thoughts first?
We talked a lot, Firuz.
Sorry about that.
I think you should have some final words.
Yeah, I will, because it's about 13 minutes past 9. So I go. So I think that it's inconclusive, meaning that when you were saying you don't feel there's any way out, I look at it the opposite. You can't make 100, when you look at all these different versions, can any of us sitting here, or anyone in the audience, be 100% sure what the prophet actually said word for word? I can't, because there's too many different.
Yeah, no, I definitely can't.
Yeah.
I just look at the evidence and the possibilities and what is more likely.
Yeah, so just to be as fair as possible, Sheikh Firuz is correct in that I don't know what Muhammad actually said.
I agree.
So a lot of things are up in the air. What I would say, I would interpret it like this: if you had really good reasons to believe that Muhammad is a prophet, then when someone comes along and says, here's a false prophecy, then it should be, okay, I really need to investigate that, because I have these good reasons to believe that Muhammad is a true prophet. And therefore, if there's room for doubting these things that are attributed to him because they turned out to be false or something like that, then I'm going to give Muhammad the benefit of the doubt because I have these reasons to believe in him. Whereas if you don't have those reasons, if you don't think there's any good reasons, or if you think that there's good reasons to believe that he's a false prophet, then when he makes a false prophecy, you go, okay, it makes perfect sense. That's what I would expect from a false prophet. So yes. So just so everyone knows, we are not ruling out and saying that Sheikh Firuz's interpretation is definitely wrong or something. I'm more along the lines of thinking, hey, I understand why someone would revise these hadiths in one direction. I don't really understand why they would revise them in another direction. In other words, if Muhammad actually said, the end is going to come many centuries from now, I don't understand why people would invent them. I mean, although I could invent possible explanations if there was someone within the first century, because you have people like this today. You like every generation has people who are saying the end is nigh, the end is, in 2 years from now, the end is coming. You could have people within the first century of Islam who make up or modify or tweak prophecies so that it makes it sound like, the end is 20 years from now. We've already gone through 80 of these 100 years. So everyone get ready. So it's possible that people can invent stuff. And because the hadiths are, pretty late, you're talking about 2 centuries after the time of Muhammad, there is time for inventing things. And Sheikh Farouz made an important point when he's talking about, hindsight, when we're applying the principle of embarrassment, applying what's embarrassing to us to previous generations when it might not have been embarrassing to them. There's also the possibility of people having reasons for doing things that we're not aware of. Like we might not even know a person's motives for inventing something. So at the end of the day, yes, everything Sheikh Farouz is saying is these are all possible interpretations of the evidence. I think what AP and I are sitting here thinking is it doesn't look like that. It doesn't.
Yeah,
really looks.
I would say from my point of view, I would agree. I have absolutely no idea what Muhammad actually said, of what Muhammad actually spoke, of which of these narrations is actually a completely accurate representation of what he said. But what I do is I simply, weigh the evidence. I look at it, and it looks to me as the most likely, the best explanation that he did indeed say these things, supported by many pieces of evidence, and that he therefore made false prophecies. I want to add also that even in Hadith studies, in Islamic studies, and I'm sure Sheikh Farouz could tell me if I'm wrong here, but even there, the idea is not that we know what Muhammad precisely said. The idea is we know what people say Muhammad said. Therefore, the reports always include, according to so and so and so and so and so and so, the Prophet said this and this. So the claim is never Muhammad said this. The claim is according to so and so, Muhammad said this. So even the Islamic scholars in the field for 1,400 years don't presume to know precisely what he said. They simply go for the narrations and for the most likely explanation of what he said, which is why they evaluate these different sources. I simply do the same here, and I conclude that he made false prophecies, and I would have to be convinced otherwise. But what I'm more curious about is, Farouz, what would convince you to accept that? And I'm not here to say I want you to accept that he was wrong right now. I'm just curious, what would convince you that there is actually something wrong here, or is it possible for you to come to such a conclusion? What is your takeaway from all of this?
I think anything's possible. As far as your last question, I don't know. I'd have to think about it. But it's not something I could think about in 30 seconds and give you an answer. And I think if you can tell by our interactions, I mean, I'm not the type who comes up with an answer in 5-10 seconds.
Yeah.
Unless it's something I already know. I'm more likely to say I don't know. I kind of, the way I look at our discussion is we're looking at the same thing. And you lean more likely that proposition A is more likely than proposition B. But you're not like amazingly strong in that camp. I argue more that I think proposition B, using the classical methodologies, is more likely. And about your question about the hadith, so like I said, there is one movement that did say that anything. We could be 100% sure, but throughout the history of Islam, they were a minority. I do think the movement spread more in the last 100 years than probably in most of Islamic history. But the best term I heard to describe hadith is probabilistically true with different levels of probability. So, that the more narrators, the more likely the Prophet Muhammad said that, or said something like that. And more narrators by itself is not, but, with other factors. But I enjoyed our conversation. Unfortunately, it has to end for tonight, but I know we'll be, picking up again tomorrow night, different topic. And thank you for having me.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed this. I think it was incredibly valuable. And to add to that, tomorrow we will actually be together again on David Wood's channel. I will link to that. So we will have another discussion about the topic of whether the Quran says the previous scriptures have been corrupted or not. Right? That's the topic.
Yeah, it's specific. I think it's I think the response was whether the Quran says the gospel's been corrupted. But if Sheikh Farouz wants to,
yeah. So no. So what it was kind of the Muslim view on the previous scriptures throughout history, because there's not one view, right? It's not just like there's more than one view, and then some were more popular than others. So it's a little more in depth than that simple quest. Like
So I have people are familiar with my view of what the Quran says about the previous scriptures, and then Sheikh Farouz is going to give his perspective, which is going to include different perspectives on the Christian scriptures. So we'll be discussing that tomorrow. Yeah.
All right. Fantastic. I would love to have more of these conversations, and thank you so much, Farouz.
Yeah, and Sheikh Farouz has to go. AP, if you wanted to hang out a couple minutes and go through the super chats, I can hang around for a few.
I will now brag about how we have destroyed the Muslim prophet.
It's finished. You're finished.
Just kidding.
Have a good one.
Yeah, talk to you tomorrow.
See you. That was very, very wholesome, and
that was refreshing. I feel like normally have a discussion with some of the Dawa guys, and like I'm gonna go like take a bath afterwards because of the raining down of endless insults and stuff. But First seems like a nice guy.
This was amazing. I mean, he actually took a lot of things that we have said seriously, took them to heart, considered different things. Like the first objection about the 100-year prophecy, he actually took our objections to it and the evidence seriously, and seems like he is processing it, and he will, based on this information, make up his mind and come to different conclusions. Maybe he will still conclude that we are totally wrong, but it's good to see that something is actually happening instead of the constant no, you are wrong and I will prove it and I'll humiliate you.
And notice the impact that has, because then we're a bit more inclined to give the benefit of the doubt where we can, and to say, okay, yes, that is a possible interpretation. Whereas if this were like an angry, hostile debate, and you guys are stupid for thinking that Muhammad made a mistake, then we would be more inclined to say, no, he's completely wrong and it's indisputable. Right. So yeah. Anyway, that's a nice change of pace. Ahmed was like that. I had a discussion with Ahmed at Finding Truth on my channel, and that was a similarly friendly discussion. So
yeah. So what is your takeaway, David? Are you now more inclined toward believing that Muhammad was actually correct about his prophecies? Are you more inclined toward thinking that I was wrong, that you are wrong about these prophecies, and that Islam might be the truth?
No, I actually, my position would still be the same, which I mentioned earlier. It's that, Farouz is correct, and that we cannot be certain that Muhammad said these things because the sources on them are late. So for me, it would come down to, do you have separate good reasons to think that he was a true prophet? Because if you did, then I would have a reason. Then I would have a separate reason to favor one interpretation over the other. So it's basically, in the absence of evidence to believe that he's a prophet, he's just a regular guy to me, or a false prophet. And therefore, if you look at it, it really makes sense that he made false prophecies and that other people modified them later. That makes sense. You could argue for that it was actually the reverse, but I just wouldn't do that without a good reason to think that he was accurate.
Yeah. I think there is actually, I'm so focused on what people say in the chat. I'm so distracted right now. Wait, I wanted to add something. I wanted to add something. I forgot. The chat is distracted. During the whole conversation, people in the chat were talking about a piano in Sheikh Farouz's background, and everyone is focused on the piano. And I think, wow, what a grand thing to focus on during such a discussion.
But yeah, people always do that. I'll be making like, hey, this is the best video I've ever made, and people are like, hey, what's up with the action figure in the back? It's like, what? That's what you're looking at? That's
Seriously. But his background was actually a picture. It wasn't his real background. So that explains why there was a piano. There was something I wanted to say in response to all of this. But anyway, I'll read a few
you shouldn't be responding to someone after he's gone.
I will. I destroyed him. I humiliated him.
We can answer super chats.
Yeah. Okay, St. Miles said, interesting show. I got some steaks to put on the grill. Intelligent conversation. Thank you. I personally also found it very, very insightful and wholesome and refreshing. Even David Wood thought so. Even he. Yeah. But thanks, St. Miles. Omar Z. Prov said, how about Proverbs said, how about this contradiction, Dr. Wood? 26, 34 to 36 and 7, 109. Was it Pharaoh or the priest? We pretty much talked about this a few streams ago. But are there any, in one sentence, maximum 4 words, is there anything you want to say about that?
Is he wanting me to defend that this is a contradiction, or to say that it's not a contradiction, or what?
I don't know, but it was already.
There are no contradictions in the perfect Quran. What's wrong with you, Omar? Your name's Omar.
Yeah.
You're named after the second rightly guided caliph. What's wrong with you?
Yeah. Have some respect. John just said, thanks, AP, for letting we speak. I marked a lot of non-super chats again just because I want to. Kenneth Sabak said, how much study about this hadith is required? About this specific hadith, which one are we talking about? The child before he grows up, the world would end, or the periods? I would say I spent a few hours, honestly, looking into the whole before this boy grows very old, the hour would be established. And an hour, just because, I brought up this earlier. I put it on the screen. This is like a very rough outline of these narrations, like of this hadith where Muhammad says, before this boy grows very old, the hour would be established, or the hour would not be established before this boy grows very old. There are 3 different variations of this hadith. In one, he says the hour. In one other, he also says the hour, but the narration is slightly different. And in the 3rd variation, he says your hour. And so I broke these down into who narrated them, where these come from, and who they go back to, and then analyzed the credibility of each one of these according to the Islamic scholars, and so on. If you want to go into all of these details and the text, the wording, and all of that, it might take, an hour or 2. But this is, of course, not the only thing that you would have to take into consideration. If you want to analyze this hadith, for example, you also have to go to different narrations, which may support or contradict this hadith, and so on. So it's a complicated topic. Ellie Shamoon said, hello, everyone. Thank you.
Hey, Ellie. I know Ellie.
You know Ellie? Who's Ellie?
He's this cool dude. He goes to conferences, and he's super cool because he always pays for everything.
Oh,
like, it'll be crazy. There'll be a group of like 20 people, and we all go out, and then we find out someone paid for everyone. Someone paid for everyone's meal, but it would be this guy.
That's fun.
Yeah, you should come. You should come hang out with us, Ellie.
Do it.
Hang out with me and AP.
Do it. I want to praise myself here quickly. I changed the background of this live stream from a bunch of stay away from Islams into just some regular fantasy or Earth thing, just because I didn't want to be too outright disrespectful to our guest. So that's how humbly good I am. Kenneth Apak said, what good comes from studying Islam all your life? Are you kidding me? A lot of good stuff comes because Allah loves you. You might believe
peace and tolerance.
Yeah.
Universal peace and tolerance.
Definitely. Anthony Smith said, AP, do you like Jews? What kind of a question is this? Why did I mark this? I do.
Because you grew up around Nazis in Germany.
Yeah. No, I love Jews, actually. I love Jews. They're my best friends and employers, by the way. John Harris said, Apostate Prophet, you are the man. Thank you. I just marked a bunch of things that praise me here.
Yeah, that's what he does. He goes through them. Up, that's negative. Up, that says I'm wrong. That says I'm wrong. That says I'm wrong. This one says I'm great. Let me save that one and read it.
Solon said AP is allowed to marry only one wife. Yeah. We love you, Apostate Prophet. Yeah. D. Bordeaux said, what does the Farouz think about MBS tossing out hadiths? He really did have only a very limited time. He said he would only be here for an hour, so we weren't able to.
So he actually stayed. He actually stayed longer than he said he could, so that's cool.
Yeah, but about MBS, the Saudi prince.
Yeah, apparently
tossing out hadiths. I don't know. We have to get everyone's opinion on that. But apparently he's doing quite a few changes which the Islamists are not liking very much in Saudi Arabia, and kind of turning Saudi Arabia into a more fun place. But there's not much that you can really do there, because it's in the end Saudi Arabia. ES 1002 said, one of the lesser signs of the hour is hadith rejecting.
That's actually, there are hadiths like that. About people, about knowledge disappearing, and I mean it's weird, because there are some hadiths which make it sound like Islam dominates the world. Islam ends up controlling everything. There are other hadiths where it makes it sound like Islam is completely wiped out and there is no Islam. Like there are hadiths which say that by the time the end comes, there wouldn't be one person left in the world calling out for Allah. And so it makes it sound like everyone has become an apostate by then. Matter of fact, hey, we should start using those, saying, hey, you Muslims, if you want the end to come, everyone has to leave Islam because the end won't come. That would be a funny video, AP. It's like, if you want Islam to be true, everyone has to leave Islam.
Please help us fulfill Muhammad's prophecy and leave Islam with us today.
Dude, if you did that like a 2-minute commercial, help us fulfill this prophecy of Muhammad.
Victor said about Sheikh Farouz, he ain't got nothing on Shake Your Booty. And
nobody is a match for Shake Your Booty.
Absolutely. And New Atheist made a super sticker, which looks like something here that I cannot see at the moment, but I'm sure it looks fantastic, man. But thank you all so much for viewing. Thank you all so much for watching. And David, anything else that you want to add before we come to the final advice?
Nope. If everything goes okay, we'll be back tomorrow. For another discussion with Sheikh Farouz.
We will actually. I pointed it out earlier, but we will be having another conversation with Farouz tomorrow on David Wood's channel, which I will link in the description. Did you already create that stream so I can link it?
No, but I'll probably do it now, and then I'll send it to you.
Okay, lazy.
I'm sorry.
I will link his channel and also the link as soon as it is available in the description, so that you can join us again for another conversation tomorrow. But this was very wholesome, and again, I say it, every Muslim apologist and scholar out there, even those who have said horrible things to me in the past, please come and join us in a conversation. Let's have this conversation, and let's let people judge what they think is and is not right. And with that said, thanks everyone for viewing. We will be back quite soon. Sarah Rainey said, nice stream. Momologic said, thank you both for sharing. Arnie Nero said, I challenge Apostate Prophet to debate something. But thanks everyone. St. Miles, bye. Thank you. Have a fantastic day, everybody, and stay away from Islam.